Have you ever noticed something strange about your own life? Think back to one summer when you were 10 years old. Maybe you remember riding your bike until the streetlights came on. Maybe it was the smell of fresh-cut grass, long afternoons that seemed to stretch forever, or that feeling that an entire lifetime could fit inside a single school vacation. Now compare that with the last 5 years. 5 birthdays, hundreds of mornings, thousands of ordinary moments. Somehow, they seem to have vanished almost overnight. It's one of the most universal experiences of adulthood. Children constantly complain that time moves too slowly. Adults can't believe another year has already passed. Grandparents often say the last 20 years felt like only yesterday. The clocks never changed. Yet our experience of time completely did. Why? Did life actually become faster? Or is something much stranger happening inside the human mind? For centuries, philosophers believed time was something we simply moved through, like passengers on a train traveling along invisible tracks. Seconds, minutes, and years existed independently of us, flowing at a perfectly constant speed. Science agrees with one part of that idea. Clock time never changes. A minute at 5 years old contains exactly the same 60 seconds as a minute at 50. Earth still completes one orbit around the sun every 365 days. The universe isn't accelerating, but your experience of it is. This is where psychology reveals something deeply surprising. Your brain doesn't actually experience time directly. It experiences change. Imagine walking through an enormous museum. If every room contains something completely different, ancient fossils, glowing gemstones, towering dinosaur skeletons, priceless paintings, your journey feels long and unforgettable. Now imagine another museum where every room looks almost identical. The same walls, the same paintings, the same furniture. Even if you walk the exact same distance, the journey somehow feels much shorter. Nothing about the distance changed. Only the amount of novelty. Your brain works in almost exactly the same way. It isn't secretly counting seconds. Instead, it asks a different question over and over again. How much new information am I experiencing? The answer quietly shapes your entire perception of time. This is why childhood feels almost impossibly long. For a young child, nearly everything is happening for the first time. The first day of school, the first best friend, the first bicycle, the first sleepover, the first movie that makes you cry, the first time you stay home alone, the first family vacation, the first broken toy, the first disappointment, the first victory. Every month introduces dozens of experiences the brain has never encountered before. And because everything is unfamiliar, the brain pays extraordinary attention. Neuroscientists have discovered that novelty captures attention automatically. When something unexpected happens, your brain allocates additional resources to understanding it. New sights, sounds, emotions, and environments become deeply encoded into memory because they might matter for survival. To a child's brain, the world is overflowing with surprises. Every street seems enormous. Every forest feels endless. Every holiday becomes an adventure. Even an ordinary trip to the grocery store can feel exciting because there are still thousands of things that have never been seen before. The world appears larger, not because it actually is, but because the brain is still busy building its internal map of reality. Adults often forget what that felt like. Not because childhood memories disappear, but because adulthood gradually replaces discovery with prediction. By the time you're 30, your brain has become astonishingly efficient. It recognizes familiar roads before you consciously notice them. It predicts conversations before they happen. It finishes other people's sentences. It knows exactly where the coffee mug sits in your kitchen. It remembers the drive to work so well that you sometimes arrive without recalling the journey at all. This efficiency is one of the greatest achievements of the human brain. Without it, everyday life would become exhausting. You would need to relearn thousands of tiny details every single morning, but every extraordinary strength carries a hidden cost. The better your brain becomes at predicting the world, the less attention it needs to pay, and the less attention it pays, the fewer memories it creates. That quiet trade-off may be the real reason adulthood seems to disappear so much faster than childhood, not because time accelerated, but because familiarity slowly taught your brain to stop noticing it. There is another illusion hiding inside this story. If childhood feels longer because everything is new, then why do vacations seem to pass so quickly while we're living them? Think about your favorite trip. Maybe it lasted only 1 week. At the time, every morning seemed to disappear in an instant. You woke up, explored somewhere new, laughed with friends, watched another sunset, and suddenly the vacation was over. Yet months later, when you look back, that single week somehow feels enormous. It seems richer than entire months spent at home. How can 1 week feel short while you're living it, but incredibly long when you remember it? Psychologists call this one of the great paradoxes of human memory. There are actually two different experiences of time. The first is experience time. This is how fast time seems to move while events are unfolding. The second is remembered time. This is how long a period feels after it has already passed. Most people assume these two are identical. They aren't. In fact, they often move in opposite directions. When you're deeply engaged in something new, exciting, or meaningful, your attention becomes completely absorbed by the present moment. You stop watching the clock. Hours disappear. This is one reason vacations seem to fly by. Your mind isn't busy measuring time. It's busy living it. But afterward, something remarkable happens. Your brain begins organizing everything it experienced. Unlike an ordinary work week filled with repeated routines, a vacation contains hundreds of unique memories. Different streets, different conversations, different smells, different meals, different people, different emotions, different mistakes, different discoveries. Every one of those moments becomes another bookmark inside memory. When you later revisit that week, your brain has a thick collection of memories to travel through. The journey backward feels long because there is so much to remember. Now compare that with an average Tuesday at home. You wake up, check your phone, eat breakfast, drive the same road, answer familiar emails, prepare dinner, watch another episode, go to sleep. Nothing about that day was bad, but very little surprised your brain. Almost everything unfolded exactly as expected. When your mind later looks back, it finds only a handful of memorable moments. An entire day becomes compressed into a single sentence. I went to work. Do that hundreds of times. And months begin collapsing into what feels like only a few memories. Neuroscientists believe this process is closely connected to something called prediction. Your brain is constantly trying to guess what will happen next. Every successful prediction saves energy. If you've driven the same route to work for 5 years, your brain no longer needs to analyze every building, every traffic light, or every turn. It has already learned the pattern. This is incredibly efficient, but efficiency comes with an unexpected psychological consequence. Prediction reduces attention. Reduced attention produces fewer detailed memories. Fewer memories create the feeling that less time has passed. In other words, the better your brain becomes at predicting life, the shorter life begins to feel. This also helps explain a strange experience almost everyone has had. Have you ever arrived home after driving somewhere, only to realize you barely remember the drive? You weren't asleep? You weren't unconscious? Your brain simply switched into automatic processing. Psychologists sometimes call this automaticity. The brain performs familiar actions with very little conscious effort because it already knows the sequence. Automaticity makes life easier. It also quietly erases enormous amounts of subjective time. The same thing happens far beyond driving. Entire conversations become predictable. Daily routines become invisible. Even years can begin repeating themselves with only tiny variations. One year becomes the year I worked there. Another becomes the year we moved. Another becomes the year nothing special happened. Of course, something special did happen. Thousands of moments happened. Thousands of smiles. Thousands of meals. Thousands of sunsets. Thousands of conversations. But memory doesn't preserve everything equally. It compresses. It summarizes. It edits. Just like an editor cutting hundreds of hours of raw footage into a 90-minute documentary, your brain constantly removes what it considers repetitive. What's left becomes the story you believe your life contained. This may be one of the most humbling discoveries in psychology. We don't simply remember our lives. We reconstruct them. And the fewer unique memories we create, the shorter those reconstructed years begin to feel. If all of this sounds unsettling, there is also something profoundly hopeful hidden inside it. Because if your brain is constantly rewriting the way you experience time, then perhaps you have far more influence over your future than you realize. Many people spend years wishing life would slow down. They blame age, responsibilities, technology, modern society. But psychology suggests a different possibility. Perhaps life doesn't become shorter because the years accelerate. Perhaps it becomes shorter because we gradually stop noticing it. Think about the people who often say time still feels rich. Someone who learns a new language at 60. Someone who starts painting after retirement. Someone who moves to another country. Someone who begins hiking every weekend. Someone who decides to play the piano for the first time. What all of these people have in common isn't youth, it's novelty. Their brains are once again encountering uncertainty. And uncertainty demands attention. Attention creates memory. Memory stretches the feeling of a life well lived. Psychologists have repeatedly found that new experiences produce stronger memory formation than repeated routines. Not necessarily because the experiences are objectively better, but because the brain has to work harder to understand them. Every unfamiliar street, every unexpected conversation, every difficult skill, every new perspective, every meaningful challenge. Each one tells the brain something important. Pay attention. This matters. Remember this. Slowly, your internal story becomes richer again. This doesn't mean you need to quit your job, travel the world, or completely reinvent your life every 6 months. Novelty doesn't have to be dramatic. Sometimes it's surprisingly small, taking a different route home, reading a book outside your usual interests, having dinner with someone whose life is completely different from yours, learning 5 words in another language, watching the sunrise instead of sleeping through it, leaving your phone at home for an afternoon walk, asking a question you've never asked before, listening instead of waiting to speak. Tiny changes often create disproportionately large memories because they interrupt automatic living. They remind your brain that today is not simply another copy of yesterday. Perhaps that is why childhood seemed endless. Not because children had more time, but because they experienced more beginnings. Adults rarely lose time because they become older. They lose time because they stop collecting beginnings. One day becomes another. Another becomes a week becomes another month. A month quietly becomes another year. Then, almost without warning, someone finds an old photograph. A birthday, a graduation, a family dinner, a vacation nobody had thought about for years. For a brief moment, the photograph becomes a doorway. The person inside the picture smiles back. The clothes are different. The hairstyle is different. The dreams are different. The worries are different. And yet, somehow, that person is still you. You don't feel sadness because time passed. You feel wonder because you never noticed yourself becoming someone new. Perhaps this is the greatest illusion of all. We spend so much energy searching for the moment that life changes. The promotion, the wedding, the move, the breakthrough, the perfect opportunity. But life rarely transforms us in dramatic explosions. It transforms us quietly. One ordinary conversation, one difficult decision, one apology, one act of courage, one forgotten Tuesday, one page at a time. Years later, those tiny moments become the architecture of an entirely different person. Maybe that's why the question isn't how to stop time from moving faster. Nobody can. The better question is this: what kind of days are you giving your future memories? Will this year become another blur your brain compresses into a single sentence? Or will it become a chapter filled with curiosity, courage, mistakes, discoveries, friendships, and moments worth remembering? Because one day, 7 years from now, another version of you will quietly look back at today. That future person won't remember every email you answered, every meeting you attended, every routine you repeated. Instead, they will remember the moments that changed the story, the decision that felt uncomfortable, the risk that seemed too small to matter, the conversation that lasted a little longer than expected, the book that quietly changed how you saw the world, the kindness nobody applauded, the ordinary day that became the beginning of a completely different life. Time was never trying to escape you. It was asking you a simple question every single day. Is today worth remembering? And perhaps the secret to making life feel longer isn't adding more years to your life. It's giving more life to your years.